evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Binns, and we're continuing with our introduction of the women of WOAMTEC, women on a mission to earn a commission. I keep putting that extra A in there, so, but anyway, get the idea. And our guest this evening is Liz DiFiore.
Hello.
Yeah. BevCam Community Engagement Manager.
That's me.
It's like a long title, yeah.
I know.
Your business card must be a 3x5, you know?
Oh yeah, we try to make a whole poster, and I just kind of like carry it around like this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, when you're talking about engagement for an operation like BevCam, what are you trying to do?
Make friends with everyone in Beverly.
And after you've made friends with them, then what?
Yeah, then we extort them for money. No, I'm kidding. No, so community engagement can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and it tends to have very different job descriptions depending on what company you're with. So I've had this title a few times over my career, but generally what it includes is you're looking at focusing on brand awareness is a really big thing, both with like just networking within the community, but also social media, marketing, looking at the other marketing avenues within the organization for, making sure that people know what your company is about and they recognize your logo and they have a specific thought when they see your logo.
Well, when you talk about awareness of BevCam, what do you want people to think of when they hear of that?
BevCam's a really interesting organization in that it's an umbrella brand, right? Like they do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Not only do they have like 4 different channel topics, right? There's education, public access, sports, and government. Mm-hmm. So just that is a lot, but then there's all of the other things that they do outside of that, such as like teaching people new technology and encouraging people to and enabling them to make their own media, having people come in and make their own shows for this, like you do, and also providing equipment for anybody who wants to do some kind of media project. It doesn't even necessarily have to be for BevCam. So we have like a library of equipment that we, we're like a library in that way. So that's a difficult question to answer. And the way that we've been approaching this is we want people to think of BevCam's purpose is to empower local people's voices. And that sort of like helps to encompass as much of that as we can. And then like once we get that, we kind of break off the messaging into all the different things that people find specifically relevant. It's a pretty like multi-step process.
Well, the thing that I would find difficult is when you get something that is as broad as BevCam is, it's like the old story about the blind man walking up to the elephant and grabbing a different piece and getting a different idea of what an elephant is from it.
I had that children's book when I was a kid, the blind mice. Anyway.
Oh, that's the old story. Somebody grabs the trunk, oh, it's like a snake. Somebody else grabs the tail, no, it's like, it goes on from there. But just marketing, describing, introducing, whatever terminology you want, a different thing to different people. Mm-hmm. So you get into the game of what do they want? Mm-hmm. What are they after? What piece of BevCam can serve that?
Yeah, and we do approach, I was brought on just last year. Actually, I'm coming up on my 1-year work anniversary this month. Very excited. Yeah. And so since then, what we've really been focusing on is, just lost my train of thought, but that's okay. That's my ADHD. I think where I was going with that is because it's going to be something different to so many different people.
Yeah.
Like we can't be everything at once all the time in marketing, right? Otherwise the message gets garbled.
Yeah.
So finding out what that core, like distilling that down into something that we feel kind of captures everything in a little bit more vague terms, and that's kind of where like that term of, that phrase of like empowering local voices comes from, or engaging neighbors or something like that, something along those lines, that just makes people think community media, and then once they have that kernel in their head associated with the BevCam logo, then we can start distilling things down into what's relevant to specific people. And BevCam is a lot to a lot of people, as you said, and we do spend a lot of time looking at how we can help solve a lot of the different problems that people have within the community, whether it's a lack of podcasting availability, and because a lot of kids are super interested in podcasting, how do they get into it? We have a way to solve that. Or if it's technology discrepancy between economic tiers within the community, we have a way of solving that as well, and having a super low cost barrier to entry for people to try out a whole bunch of different technology they might not have access to.
Yeah. So I've been playing this game for quite some time, and I think I recognize a lot of what you're saying is what's available, but there's a lot more that I'm not exposed to. And I'm used to coming into a studio, setting up before the cameras. We got a director in the booth running everything for us.
Hi, Chris.
And that's a pretty big operation if you had to set that up, or if I had to set it up in my living room or something.
It's really intimidating.
Yeah. And I can see that it's easy to encourage people to say, okay, I've got an issue I want to bring before the public, or I want to introduce the public to something like WOAMTEC, which is what we're doing this morning.
Yeah.
And you get to the point of, how do you make this happen? And I got dragged into this thing bits and pieces. But if somebody's got an urge to do something along the lines of communicating, which is what we're into, how do they get started? Do they just knock on your door? Or where are you that they can knock? What door do they knock on?
Well, in a couple of months, they'll be able to knock on the door of 261 Cabot Street. So that's a problem within BevCam that they've been trying to solve for a long time. How do we get over that barrier to entry, so to speak? Because it is like, for those of you who have not been to our studio, there are 3 cameras here, and screens and lights and microphones, and it can be very intimidating, as you said.
Yeah.
And so this past year, we've spent a lot of time looking at how people contact us, what that funnel looks like, and how can we make it easier and lower that barrier for people. So that's actually a really big reason why we're opening up the downtown location, is that will be a community media center that just is going to be way easier for people to access if they feel that they're not tech savvy, if they feel like, this sort of thing has always been intimidating, or if they've never even thought about it and then they go somewhere to get inspired. That location is meant to be, and will be designed in a way that just makes everything a lot more inviting. The podcast set that will be there is just going to be like a couple of buttons that you have to learn how to, what they do, and then you can host your own podcast pretty easily in that way with video, and you don't have to learn all of this. And we're really hoping that allows, that it allows people to feel more empowered with the technology that we have and with creating media, that eventually they get interested in trying to learn the bigger cameras or the bigger microphones and the studio and all of that. Because it's not that big of a jump from, just a couple of buttons up to full studio. It feels like a really big jump when you're just looking at it and you don't know anything about it. But just like, I feel like most things, once you start to learn a little bit, not only do you get to know just enough to get yourself in trouble, which I think is always the most fun part, but it also just makes everything else a lot less intimidating. And we want people to be able to think of media as a potential job for themselves, or as a way to creatively express themselves, or as a way to raise an issue that they've been concerned about within their community. There's so many different ways that media, video media and audio is used today, especially with social media as popular as it is, that we feel it's really important that people feel like they can access that.
Well, I got into this discussion a little bit before we started with Chris about what's a podcast. And it turns out it's such a generic term that it can be anything.
Think radio shows. Like that. Well, that's really what a podcast started as. It's just radio talk shows.
Yeah, it's a radio talk show. That's what it starts as. But
and eventually
one of
they
my
introduced
favorite
cameras.
podcasts that I watch is not much more than what we were doing during COVID, where we couldn't use the studio and we're doing everything on Zoom. So it's a whole range of things, and I think this is part of the problem of trying to understand, I'm going to make a podcast. Well, what's a podcast? Well, it can be almost anything you want it to be. And you get into this ball of wax that you keep pulling pieces, excuse me, and you don't get the thing unraveled very quickly. So once you're set up downtown, what kind of support can somebody get? They knock on your front door and say, I want to make a podcast, or I want to make a video.
Well, for starters, our staff will be there, our lovely, lovely staff. And all of us are trained to help, to teach people and train people on using whatever equipment is available. But one of the most important parts of that journey is when people come in through the door and they say, I have an idea. We do what's called a pre-production meeting. And that's just you talking to us about your idea and us giving you suggestions on what sort of technology we think you might use, what sort of format we think might best relay your idea if you don't already have ideas on that. And just kind of untangling that a little bit to give you a clear idea of, what the expectations are going into it. So it should be a pretty welcoming space to just come in through the door and be like, how do I start a podcast? And then, I might be the one at the desk and I'll just be like, you talk to me first. And we're imagining that, we're envisioning and setting it up so that there's not too many steps in between that first initial conversation and getting an appointment to just come in and get to do your first show. It's meant to be easy to pick up in that way.
Yeah. Well, when you say the staff will be there, right now there's 4 of you?
5.
5? Everybody
5 full-time. We have 5 full-time staff.
5 full-time. Is everybody going to move downtown? Or
No.
How's the split going to work?
Yeah, so I'm going to be moving down there full-time. Rob, our executive director, is likely moving down there full-time. Amanda, our new education and media manager, is likely going to be bopping between the 2 spots. And then Chris and Michelle are likely to stay here most of the time. And then we've got some really exciting new interns, and then we have a number of long-time part-time workers who are interested in helping us staff that space.
Yeah.
So we're looking at opening later on weekdays so that it works with people who have to work a normal 9 to 5, as well as on weekends, as opposed to this space, which is open pretty much just 9 to 5.
Yeah. Yeah, that used to be a problem with some of the earlier shows we did, that you want to get a guest, and, well, I'm working in Boston, and I can't get there before 6 o'clock or something or 5 o'clock, and we would have to set up with our own camera people, own director, as well as host and guest. So it got to be very complicated. So I think that's a major advantage of the downtown situation, where they have the flexibility that somebody can get in from Boston or Burlington or wherever they're working, and you can still have a discussion on camera or on a podcast. Yeah.
It's also easy access from public transportation too, and pretty walkable. So whereas the high school isn't quite as accessible. We've got a bigger parking lot here, but not everybody drives.
Yeah. And so it has its advantages. So in your prior life, you used to be a illustrator. I guess you still are an illustrator.
Yeah.
And some of your pictures that keep popping up.
I did, yes. So I was a full-time freelance children's illustrator for 5 years, and just ended that full-time job with my BevCam job. I was. I've wanted to be a children's illustrator since if you listen to my mother, since I was 4 years old. It's a long time dream. I went to art school specifically for illustration as well as graphic design. I got a minor in marketing, which paid the bills for like most of my career. And when my husband and I moved to New England from Western New York in 2018, he is also an engineer, and that summer he kind of like sat me down and he was like, "We may never be this financially stable again. If you wanted to try going solo, now would be the time to do it."
Oh, okay.
So I quit my job. And I enjoyed my job. It was no shade on them, but it was an opportunity to try out my dream, and I was lucky enough to have someone who could support me through those initial tough years.
Well, what is your dream?
To be a children's illustrator.
Oh, to be a children's illustrator.
Yeah, to illustrate children's books.
So what did you work for?
I worked for myself.
Oh, okay. Independent contractor.
Yeah, I was a freelancer. Which most illustrators are freelancers, at least in the children's book sphere. Yeah. I worked with authors who were looking to self-publish their children's books. So I knew the whole process from beginning to end for self-publishing and could help walk them through that. And my marketing background helped a lot for new authors who maybe didn't know how to get their book out there. So I ended up publishing 4 children's books during that time, even during the pandemic, which was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And I did a lot of other things too as an artist during that time. And I still do some of it. I have 1 or 2 favorite clients that I will still do freelance for throughout this past year. But I'm focusing more on my BevCam job at the moment.
So it's the same kind of job as what you're doing here. Somebody comes with
It's
an
very
idea,
similar.
and they really don't know how to get from, in the case of a children's book, I got a bunch of words, I need a bunch of pictures, and we need to put them into a book and get them into the market.
Yeah.
So
it's really similar.
So it's really more than just a children's illustrator. You're a marketeer and
you're a project manager and all of that. And for those illustrators out there, your fees should definitely reflect that you're all of those things, not just an illustrator, but regardless.
Yeah.
I'm pretty passionate about, throughout that time, I learned so much about the business side of being a creative professional, because, how much of that time are you spending actually doing the creative work? Proportionally, it's not as much as you think, because you're running your own business.
Yeah.
I actually spent 2 years. I volunteered with a bunch of trade associations while I was doing this, because that's a great way to expand your network.
Yeah.
And I actually spent 2 years as president of my national trade association during that time, the Graphic Artists Guild. So I was freelancing for children's illustration, and I was also mentoring a lot of artists across the U.S. With how to be better business people, so that they could actually get the value that they provide.
Well, that gets to be the big part of the problem. Is really you can sit in a dark corner and imagine all sorts of great things, but if you're trying to put bread on the table or have something jingle in your pockets, you got to market it. You got to get into the business of producing and publishing and distributing, and there are bits and pieces, I guess, of this work being done by different organizations, and more than half of the game is figuring out who's the next step in the line that I need to go to, and who can do that.
Or how do I do it myself? How do I learn that skill? There's a lot to being a professional artist that a lot of people don't realize first getting into it. I certainly made a lot of mistakes my first year as a professional artist, and groups like the Guild were really influential for helping me correct those mistakes, and also helping other people not have to make those mistakes. Just making the industry healthier as a whole with better professionals.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff in this world that depends upon making mistakes, and in the engineering business, the joke is that you design something, you build it and break it, and build it and break it, and build it and break it. When it stops breaking, you throw the drawings over the wall. Manufacturer makes a bunch, and it's kind of ridiculous as it sounds. That's a lot of the businesses.
And that's very true for the creative business as well. Absolutely. We go through many, many, many different variations of something before you even see close to the final art. And I think that's something that engineering and illustration, or engineering and visual arts, have always had in common.
So
but there's some mistakes, that if I can avoid somebody else having to make, then the industry is all the better for it. Such as not knowing that you're giving away all of your rights to the work, and no longer having the rights to your own work. That's something that happens a lot, especially with artists who are new to the industry, and it's something that the industry is just going to be 100% better for if more artists know how to avoid that.
Yeah, it was like Edison's comment that when he was designing developing the light bulb, I didn't make 10,000 mistakes. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And it's part of the game is attitude.
Yes.
I guess that if it didn't work the first time, you don't give up, and you try to learn from it. So you're setting up downtown. There's going to be 3 there, maybe 4, depending on the day. I think I've seen some illustrations where you're going to have the podcast in the front window.
Yeah.
And that can be kind of intimidating, I guess. Looking
We've
up at
got
a
curtains. We've got curtains we can draw if people don't want to be, available to the public. But I think in a lot of situations, people have been really excited about the fact that the podcasting will be in the window, especially the people who do interviews or who talk to those people on city council or local business people, because they want that exposure, or they want the ability to have, people pulling in people from the street to ask questions, or that sort of local engagement. So a lot of people have been excited about that, but we will have a curtain for those people who don't want to have that kind of
Well,
exposure.
that brings up a bunch of other TV shows that would always go out and have an interview with the man on the street.
Yes, yes.
And they would edit that for comedy effect and get the dumbest answers from the people and kind of thing. And one thing I was thinking about it as you mentioned this, okay, somebody's sitting in the front window downtown on Cabot Street, and they're having a discussion like we're having, and there's somebody over here leaning on the window. And are you going to be broadcasting what they're saying to the street?
I think that's up to the producer, the person who's doing the podcast, whether or not that happens. But also, I don't think we have any plans right now for permanent speakers going to the street.
Yeah.
I imagine broadcasting everything all the time would get a little annoying to the people walking around. But we do want to broadcast certain things to the street, especially during festivals, moments like that. But I think if you choose to have the windows open for your podcast, then having people like peering in the window or even like making a face as they go by is kind of part of it. Like you sign up for it. Yeah. And my personal opinion is that if anything, it's just good content. It just adds flavor to it.
It'd be quite raucous, somebody banging on the window. You said what? You can't do that. Could be a great comedy show. If
it could be like, again, like depending on what it is and the situation, every situation handled differently, I think. But in a lot of times, spontaneous moments like that kind of just add to the media.
Yeah, and you could have a camera on the people on the streets. That'd be half the show. You
could, yeah. There are plenty of channels on YouTube, Twitch, all of those places where people like to watch podcasts as opposed to just listening to them. I certainly am a huge consumer of YouTube and Twitch. And there's so many that are just like entirely, it's called IRL, focused in real life. And it's meant to invoke those kind of spontaneous interactions with people or using moments like that to add to the content. So some people may want that to happen, and others may not. But I think we can certainly mitigate it in those situations.
Thinking way back when in radio, there used to be a show, People Are Funny, so it works. So you're going to be set up downtown in what, a couple of weeks?
We're going to be set up in a couple of weeks. We're going to do a soft opening, I think, at the beginning of May, and then a grand opening, likely the first week of June. Don't quote me on that, but that's what the schedule is sounding like. So right in time for Arts Fest.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for staying with us this evening, and you've got the timetable to when to show up downtown and enjoy the Better Show. And once again, thanks for watching. And if you got any comments, my email address is after the end of the credits. Or if you want a space at the table, we can make that happen too.